Chris Arreola versus Fred Kassi ends in a 10-round majority decision draw. There's a lot of people out there who seem to be crying robbery. They believe that Fred Kassi won the fight quite handily on points. I don't think this was a robbery. I think that a draw is a fair result, and I actually feel like Arreola maybe nicked the fight by 1 or 2 rounds, but I can't complain about a draw. Fred Kassi was, going into the fight, an unknown quantity for most boxing fans. They just thought he was some anonymous journeyman that Chris Arreola would just walk straight through. But in Chris Arreola's last couple fights, certainly in his last fight, the last fight that I saw, he fought a journeyman who I think hadn't fought in a couple years. The guy was literally terrible. And he gave Chris Arreola life and death. So Arreola hasn't been in good form. So even against a journeyman, I've got no idea why anyone would think Chris Arreola was just going to walk through the guy. And for those of you who have seen Fred Kassi before, as I had, you may remember that he was the guy that Amir Mansour spectacularly knocked out with one punch, a right hook, last year. It was one of the knockout of the year candidates. The punch was so hard, it sounded like a subwoofer when it landed. But prior to Kassi being knocked out with that brutal right hook, Kassi was actually winning that fight against Amir Mansour. He had Amir Mansour bleeding from the mouth, bleeding from the nose. His eyes were swelling up. And he was actually outboxing Amir Mansour. Fred Kassi is a very awkward fighter. Very, very awkward. He's defensive. He switches from southpaw to orthodox. He fights in a very unusual manner. Throws very strange punches, unorthodox kind of punches. Has a very offbeat type of rhythm. And he's just very difficult to catch clean. If you ask Amir Mansour, he's going to confirm all that as being true. And Chris Arreola found it the same way. So this was, in my mind, always going to be an awkward night out for Chris Arreola. Fred Kassi is not a guy that is easy to catch. And you saw it in the ring. Yeah, Fred Kassi, and I think that the fact that people had such low expectations of Kassi, the fact he was having success in there against Arreola, I think the success, it shocked people that much that they kind of got carried away in thinking that Kassi was actually winning the fight handily, when in reality, Arreola was doing some decent work himself, particularly to the body. Later on in the fight, he was doing real good work to the body. Yeah, Kassi was landing cute shots here and there, but I never at any stage felt that, I mean, early on, Kassi did most of his best work, but as the fight progressed, I never at any stage felt that Kassi was running away with it or the rounds weren't competitive or anything like that. So I definitely had a little disagreement with Paulie Malignaggi, who was one of the commentators. He felt that Fred Kassi won the fight. I don't know. I feel like a draw is a fair result. I can't complain. I'm not gonna, say that anyone who thinks that Fred Kassi won the fight by a point or two is, I mean, in another world, I'm not saying it's ridiculous. It's feasible, but I think a draw was a fair result. And Chris Arreola will probably still get his shot against Deontay Wilder coming off the back of a draw. Fred Kassi, not a name for Wilder. And maybe some people will say, well, that's why Fred Kassi didn't get the decision, didn't get a win, and Arreola was saved by a draw. I know people are going to say that. But personally, I just felt that Kassi didn't do enough down the stretch to stop Arreola coming back into it and taking that draw. So that's my thoughts on the fight. Wasn't surprised. Kassi is a very awkward customer. Ask Amir Mansour. But drop your comments below and let me know how you felt about the fight. And how do you see Chris Arreola doing against Deontay Wilder? How do you see that fight going down? It's your boy Hatman, I'm out.